So we live in a society that is relentlessly pushing us to conform, where we constantly feel pressure to change who we are in order to adhere to the values and behaviors, beliefs, and more of the dominant culture that makes up the power ranks or the leadership ranks. And so in the context of feeling this constant pressure to change who we are or to conform, it's really challenging to receive advice like, you should be yourself, or you should be as authentic as possible, because that type of feedback feels utterly meaningless when you constantly are battling or struggling with the pressure to conform. And this is exactly why when I wrote my book called The Authenticity Principle, I decided to develop a model, which I call the 3 Selves framework, to help people live out a more authentic life, live, work, and lead more authentically in a far more sophisticated, nuanced way. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the 3 Selves framework, recognizing that each of us has each of the 3 selves. And as I take us through each of these selves, I'd like you to be thinking about what's happening for you in the workplace, in your family life, in your personal life, and more. We're going to start with the authentic self because it's the most important self of all. Your authentic self is a self where if I said to you, if there were no negative consequences for your behaviors, how would you show up? So how would you speak? How would you dress? How would you emote? How would you leverage nonverbal communication? How would you behave? And so much more. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly of who we are. But because it's the truest reflection of our core self, it feels the most empowering to do. It feels the most liberating to do. So my question for you is, to what extent are you living as your authentic self as much as possible in your work life, your personal life, your family life, and more? I'm going to skip over the second self, the middle self, and I'm going to move to the third self. The third self is called the performing self. The performing self falls into what I call the zone of disempowerment. Your performing self is a self where you feel like you don't have a choice but to change who you are, to mask aspects of your identity in order to fit in order to shield from biases, in order to get opportunities, in order to have the door of acceptance opened a crack for you. But because it's about changing and masking aspects of your identity, and we do this largely to shield from bias, it feels really disempowering. It feels humiliating. It feels disrespectful. It feels exclusionary. And frankly, if you know from performing all day long, it feels exhausting. And by the way, when I say performing, I mean life is a stage and you're an actor on the stage putting out a curated sense of who you are. So after today, know that when we perform, it actually causes us to have diminished mental health, physical health, and more because we can't be who we are. And so after today, you really want to figure out where are you performing and kick out of that. But the second self, the middle self, is a self where I'm going to spend a bit more time because it's a self that we've never actually explored in this way before. And yet it is an extremely important place to be. The adapted self is what it is called. And the adapted self is a really important place because when we explore our adapted self, we start to see that, wow, I have way more agency to choose, exercise choice, and how to behave. I can choose to be more authentic. We start to realize I'm actually behaving more authentically than I thought. I just thought I was conforming most of the time. And lastly, it's a really safe place to stay and play. Use it as a springboard to come more over to living as your authentic self. So the adapted self is a self that says, okay, I can see where I'm performing. I'm going to do that as little as possible after today going forward because I see that it doesn't actually serve me to change who I am in order to fit in. In fact, changing who I am to fit in, performing, will never replace true belonging. So I will figure that out. But I look over at my authentic self and Ritu, I can't be authentic 100% of the times because I want to keep my children, keep my spouse, keep my job, not go to jail, not get voted off the island, and so much more. And you would be 100% correct to say this because no one can be authentic 100% of the time based on my work and research because we're, as human beings, we're animals, very communal. We live in societies where there need to be mechanisms of social control. So the adapted self is a self that says, I will willingly, by choice, happily choose to adjust or adapt my behavior to meet my needs and the needs of others. It's willing, it's a choice, it feels empowering to do. It's still a manifestation of our authenticity. It meets my needs and the needs of others. And in fact, a lot of us are living a lot in the adapted self already. So for example, even as I share this video with you, I like to cuss like a pirate. I would normally, if I was just chatting with you casually, be cussing left, right, and center, but I know that that's not appropriate for this video. So I'm choosing to adapt in how I'm speaking. So a lot of us are already doing this. What you really want to start to figure out is, when are you performing, push over to being more adaptive, and ultimately get to a place where you're living more and more authentically as much as possible. How do you make this all happen? I have tons of resources for you at ritubasine.com. I have what are called empower pages on each of the 3 selves. I even have an empower page on how do you learn to flow more from your adapted self into your authentic self. And then also you can always check out my book, The Authenticity Principle. So I hope that this model, this framework, the 3 selves, helps you going forward. Thanks as always for watching.